How has the CIA interfered in the American film industry since the Cold War era till today? What Hollywood films have come to market carrying the CIA's message and offering a vicious and extreme image of America's enemies? Who are the enemies? Who are targeted for destruction by the American agents? In 1917, when the United States entered World War I, President Woodrow Wilson's Committee on Public Information enlisted the aid of America's film industry to making training films and features supporting the cause. George Creel, chairman of the CPI, believed that the movies had a role in carrying the gospel of Americanism to every corner of the globe. The Federal Bureau of Investigation established an office in the 1930s to bolster its image in radio programs, films, and television shows. In 1947, the Department of Defense followed suit, and now the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Secret Service all have motion picture and television officers or official assistants to the media on their payroll. During World War II, Hollywood's contribution was to provide propaganda.
Hollywood's most famous movie stars leave the film capital to help the government sell war bonds. Irene Dunne, Ronald Colman, Hedy Lamarr, Greer Garson, all part of a contingent of some 50 screen celebrities giving their time and talents to aid the national war effort. The country has asked the people to invest $1 billion in 1 month to help pay for the war. And here's the start of the drive. Boarding a special train for Washington, they'll tour 300 cities from coast to coast. Go to any city that agrees to subscribe at least $1 million.
Buy a bond, and by, the bonds you buy'll bring you victory.
After the war, Washington reciprocated by using subsidies, special provisions in the Marshall Plan, and general clout to pry open resistant European film markets.
For after all, you know that you're investing in the best, till the lads come back again, back the old attack again. Buy.
Despite the fact that it has existed since 1947, the Central Intelligence Agency was the last major government agency to establish formal relations with the motion picture industry. The CIA claims that it began cooperating with Hollywood in the 1990s to help reverse its image in film and television, since these mediums have usually depicted the agency as a rogue, immoral outfit with a penchant for assassination and failure. However, historical evidence proves otherwise. Anyone who observes Hollywood movies knows that Hollywood is attracted to the spy genre, but few know that from the 1970s in films such as 3 Days of the Condor, and still today in films such as The Bourne Identity and Body of Lies, the CIA doesn't merely play a guiding role to filmmakers, but also bribes them.
Well, one could suppose there could be a positive aspect only insofar as the filmmaker is concerned with staying true to real life. If you want sort of a realistic dramatization of events, you would want to have some kind of advisors. But of course, the CIA is not necessarily, really necessary for that. You can have military advisors, you could have military intelligence advisors, you could even have retired agency employees and others who could provide that same service. Rather, having so-called advisors on site for the making of films is less about realism, and it's more about the actual policy. It's more about making sure that the film is in line with what the CIA wants to project. And you can rest assured that if a film were to go against what the CIA wanted to project, then that film would either be edited, or it would be cut, or it would be outright not released. We have seen this a number of times historically as well. And so from a technical perspective, certainly one could make an argument that there's a valid reason, but I think that argument is really shattered by the simple fact that realism is not what the CIA is interested in. Realism is maybe the interest of the director, but no one else.
Operation Mockingbird was one in a series of programs by the CIA to infiltrate and influence the media. It was mainly meant to fight the Soviet propaganda war, since the Soviets were trying to use America's dark history regarding ethnic and racial minorities against it for propaganda purposes.
I thought that it was a matter of real concern that planted stories intended to serve a national purpose abroad came home and were circulated here and believed here, because this would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. Now we're looking at that very carefully.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to two American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
Every society to some degree has structural elements that want a particular representation of the individuals in society. The CIA's involvement in Hollywood goes all the way back to not only Hollywood, it really starts in the media. In 1953, Alan Dulles created a department that wanted to really influence the media in the CIA. Carl Bernstein, of the famous Woodward and Bernstein journalist who exposed Watergate, he was actually the co-winner of the Pulitzer Prize in, I believe, 1973. In 1977, I believe, he published an article, about 20,000 to 25,000 words, titled "The CIA and the Media," and this was actually published in Rolling Stone magazine in 1977, and it really disclosed the sleight of hand that Hollywood had in influencing the media as a whole. Now, eventually, this would lend itself to Hollywood for obvious reasons, but there was actually in the 70s, Senator Frank Church headed a committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, to actually look into the involvement, the extent of the involvement in the CIA in the media. We had William Colby and George Bush Sr. Come out and actually, sort of thwarted the investigation, and their logic was, what their reasoning was, that this would disclose some highly sensitive information. It would not be right for national security. A lot of the same issues we see going on today.
The agency's decision to work publicly with Hollywood was preceded by the 1991 Task Force Report on Greater CIA Openness, compiled by CIA Director Robert Gale's newly appointed Openness Task Force, which secretly debated, ironically, whether the agency should be less secretive. The report acknowledges that the CIA now has relationships with reporters from every major wire service, newspaper, news weekly, and television network in the nation, and the authors of the report note that this helped them turn some intelligence failure stories into intelligence success stories, and has contributed to the accuracy of countless others. It goes on to reveal that the CIA has in the past persuaded reporters to postpone, change, hold, or even scrap stories that could have adversely affected national security interests.
people, Hollywood actors, as well as producers and directors and other entertainment executives, just what the relationships are. And this goes all the way back to the precursor of the CIA, the Office of Strategic Services, who used to get in bed with Hollywood and the mass media in the United States. John Ford, Alfred Hitchcock, a lot of these big names that people don't really realize had intricate relationships, financial and otherwise, with the American intelligence community.
With the CIA's 50-year history in the affairs of media, it should not come as a surprise that it is now still interfering in many of the most popular films and TV shows. Espionage novelist Tom Clancy has enjoyed an especially close relationship with the CIA. In 1984, Clancy was invited to Langley after writing The Hunt for Red October, which was later turned into the 1990 film.
I present you the ballistic missile submarine Red October. My officers and I request asylum in the United States of America.
The agency invited him again when he was working on Patriot Games in 1992, and the movie adaptation was, in turn, granted access to Langley facilities. More recently, The Sum of All Fears in 2002 depicted the CIA as tracking down terrorists who detonate a nuclear weapon on US soil. For this production, CIA Director George Tenet gave the filmmakers a personal tour of the Langley headquarters. The film's star, Ben Affleck, also consulted with agency analysts.
Where are you going?
I can't tell you that, Jack. Tell her where you're going. In fact, tell her who you work for. She'll be impressed. I work for the CIA, and the director asked me at the last minute to come with him to Russia to do a nuclear arms inspection.
To more recently, we have in post 9/11, we actually had a visit, and this is all open, a visit from, in the aftermath of 9/11, George Bush, Dick Cheney, and Karl Rove made a visit to Hollywood in an effort to have greater cooperation with the war on terror. They actually met with the head of the MPAA, Jack Valenti, and they wanted to figure out ways in how the war on terror could benefit not only national security, but depict certain representations of the United States, its missions in military.
Black Hawk Down, Zero Dark 30, and Argo. Those are only a few major recent productions showing how today's movie industry promotes US foreign policy.
And now for the moment we have all been waiting for. And the Oscar goes to Argo.
With Michelle Obama awarding Ben Affleck's Argo the Oscar for Best Movie, the industry showed how close it is to Washington.
Argo has 7 Academy Award nominations this year.
Argo is a propaganda film concealing the ugly truth about the Iranian hostage crisis and designed to prepare the American public for a potential upcoming confrontation with Iran. It glorifies the CIA, and Ben Affleck spoke with the highest praise for the CIA.
One of the themes of Argo is about storytelling and how powerful it is, from political theater to the way we kind of communicate to our children to the way that we inspire people, and it's interesting that Hollywood and the clandestine services are both spend most of their time convincing people that something that's not true. I think probably Hollywood is full of CIA agents, and we just don't know it. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to discover that, this was extremely common.
I got an idea.
They're a Canadian film crew for a science fiction movie.
I fly into Tehran. We all fly out together as a film crew.
I need you to help me make a fake movie.
So you want to come to Hollywood and act like a big shot without actually doing anything?
Yeah.
Argo was very politically motivated for a myriad of reasons. First of all, the CIA had lost a lot of credibility. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, the CIA was asleep at the wheel and failed to predict the fall of the Soviet Union, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and then, of course, the CIA had been caught by the American people providing false intelligence about weapons of mass destruction, which did not exist. Now, those are the big ones. There's a whole lot of other massive lies and deceptions that the CIA had engaged in. And so what happens is you had the creation of this Argo film. Let's understand there's two Argo films. There was the creation of the fraudulent Argo film by Hollywood in conjunction with the CIA back in 1979, and then the creation of this second Argo film, which was created to deceive the American public and to distract them and to make the CIA into the good guys that, worked with Hollywood to go in and rescue Americans. So it was very politically motivated, but it was also, the film itself was a weapon of mass distraction.
Zero Dark 30 is another great silver screen propaganda piece. It exploits the horrific events of 9/11 to present torture as an effective and necessary evil. It leaves the viewer with the erroneous impression that torture helped the CIA find bin Laden's hiding place in Pakistan. It ignores both the illegality and immorality of using torture as an interrogation tool. The thriller opens with the words, based on first-hand accounts of actual events. After showing footage of the horrific 9/11 attacks, it moves into a graphic and lengthy depiction of torture. Responding to the torture, the so-called terrorist divulges the name of the courier who ultimately leads the CIA to bin Laden's location and assassination. It may be good theatre, but it is inaccurate and misleading.
Grab me the bucket.
Huh?
Come on, grab the bucket.
Fuck you!
Emails of the rest of the Saudi group. Give me one email and I will stop this. Who's in the Saudi group? What's the target?
CIA is primarily interested in Hollywood because Hollywood is one of the principal means through which the establishment in the United States is able to shape public opinion. Whether you want to talk about mobilizing support for a particular issue, mobilizing support for a war, or even just cementing a given narrative, Hollywood is able to do that because as time moves on, people tend to remember the most memorable events and the most memorable aspects of a given story. And I think a good example of that would be Zero Dark 30 recently, the Hollywood film which dramatized the so-called bin Laden raid, which of course, if you actually investigate the story of what happened to bin Laden and what reportedly happened to bin Laden, you know that Zero Dark 30 is less a documented account of what happened and more of the fairy tale that's presented by the CIA. So in many ways, then, Hollywood and the CIA work hand in hand in order to cement the narrative that is necessary for policymakers and for intelligence operatives around the world. The bin Laden raid is merely one example. Of course, we know the CIA has been intimately involved in shaping the narrative regarding movies depicting the Iranian Islamic Revolution of 1979. They've been intimately involved in anti-Soviet and anti-Russian films and television shows. They're intimately involved in a number of Hollywood projects that build the U.S. foreign policy line and that toe the U.S. foreign policy line. And the CIA's role is in shaping that narrative and in projecting it into Hollywood and into the public consciousness.
You know, we hear the term by a lot of media personalities and Hollywood personalities, particularly Rush Limbaugh, low information voter. We hear a lot of people trying to pigeonhole people into categories, when the fact of the matter is Hollywood and the CIA counts on the low information voter and counts on a specific type of programming. The film like Argo, which was specifically designed to, the second Argo, the Affleck film is the second Argo film to distract the American public from engaging in critical thought and critical review of the CIA and the intelligence services. They also use Hollywood to demonize and to create enemies where there are no enemies. Hollywood recently came out with a new TV series which America can see on its TV every week called The Last Ship. And so every week, the villain in that TV series is none other than Russia. Not too terribly long ago, Russia was seen as a great American ally. Things changed when Russia began to defend its geopolitical and ethno interests. So you see this happening, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the CIA is probably funding in some shape or form that series, because the series is completely lacking in any real entertainment enrichment.